Hello, and thank you for coming back to another episode of This All Stops When We Start Talking About It. If you haven't seen our first episode, I strongly urge that you watch that before this episode, as this is a chronological story, and I will be picking up in October of 2023, but the original story started in March of 2023. So if you'd like to get caught up on that, I would strongly recommend that you watch episode one. Um, I want to thank those of you that watched the first time around. I am glad you're tuning back in. I hope you understand the significance of this. I realize some of you may not like this format. You might find it dramatic, but I want to make it very clear that I attempted to follow the rules. I attempted to follow the law enforcement hierarchy to ask for assistance. When I was having troubles with Don Wilson, I went straight to Christian Hatfield, and I have a thorough record of me trying to do that. When Hatfield wouldn't help me, I tried to go to Phil Weiser, the Attorney General. He's not even responded to any of my complaints. I believe the last time I had heard there were 17 complaints filed by citizens of Dolores County, and I know of 11 of them personally, and we have not even received a response from him. I've tried to contact Governor Polis. I actually was contacted by his office with regards to giving feedback on one of the potential judicial candidates, and I tried to tell them then. I have written numerous complaints to the FBI. I even attempted to file a Department of Justice discrimination suit for my client, who happens to be a white male. I was doing that trying to get any attention possible because I didn't know what to do. So I want to make it very clear that this was not my first choice. In fact, it's my last choice and it's my last option. And that's why I'm doing it. So I just want to make sure that you are all aware that this is not me just being dramatic or trying to make a career for myself. The honest truth is, I wanted to quit the practice of law. They all knew that. I was on my way transitioning out. I was very unhappy there. They bullied me for a number of years and they made it twice as hard, sometimes three times as hard to do my cases as any other person. Every time I asked for records requests, I was met with opposition to the point that I had to tell my clients, don't tell them I'm your lawyer because they won't give you your records. Um, my clients will vouch for me on this. They know that I was targeted by government officials. And I believe the reason why they targeted me is because they knew I would do this someday. So here we are. But I've always told my clients, whenever you're in a bad situation and you're being abused, you have three choices. You can put up with it, you can leave and remove yourself from the situation, or you can make a scene. And I put up with it for almost 12 years. I've had enough. I didn't deserve the way I was treated, and I'm not letting myself be subjected to that anymore. I tried to leave. I don't know if most of you know this. I don't live in Colorado anymore. When I realized I was not going to be protected in Montezuma County, and I was very much in fear for my life from government actors, I moved to Kansas in February. I don't know if you know that. I'm a Kansas resident now. I don't live there anymore. Doesn't mean my heart's not still there. And that's why I'm doing this program, because you all need help. It's very, very dangerous there. But I left. I tried that one. So the final thing I have left is to make a scene. So that's what I'm doing. It shouldn't have had to be this way. All I asked you ever to do is your job, but you wouldn't do it. So here we are. To recap from last time, I was discussing one of my divorce clients, a man from Dolores County, who was the victim of domestic abuse from his spouse and who was targeted and abused by her before and after his divorce proceedings with the assistance of Dolores County Sheriff's Office. And where we left off was the fall of 2023 when my client continued to get harassed at the Dolores County football games. His daughter as well. His daughter had a protection order against the daughter of the woman. And my client had a protection order against both the woman and her daughter. And my client's grandson was also included in those protective orders because of the danger that these women were posing to them. And Dolores County Sheriff's Office was refusing to assist. They were laughing at my clients. They were threatening them. They were cussing them out. And it all sort of came to a head right at the end of October. October of 2023, they were continuing to harass him. The bank she had previously threatened one of his bank tellers who happened to be a friend of his. And her and her daughter went to the bank and were taking photos of this woman's the vehicle that she was driving, yelling at her, harassing her. I don't know the truth of this story, but what I was told was that the woman who worked at the bank was asked to clock out and leave because the bank didn't want to invite the anger and wrath of these two women who were well known in the community for being bullies. And that woman tried to get assistance. She tried to get two protection orders. They were both denied. And so I wasn't representing her, but I felt bad for her because I knew she was involved in the case because of her being a friend to my client. And so I assisted her in trying to contact the district attorney's office. So at this point in time, the district attorney's office is well aware that there are now 3 people being harassed by these women. That would include the bank teller, the daughter of my client, and my client. And we can't get any help. So I sent this email to Steve Bronk, a series of emails. In fact, my client, his daughter, and the bank teller all did sworn affidavits with photos, with evidence, with images of these women doing things, with responses from Don Wilson in the form of emails. We provided them everything. I wasn't asking them to do anything except for stop the madness. These people were in danger. My client, who again was done with his divorce case, ended up having to spend $10,000 with me after the fact, trying to protect himself from Don Wilson, the Dolores County Sheriff's Office, his ex-wife, and his ex-daughter-in-law. That's not right. I don't care what political party you belong to. We have rules and laws that are required to be followed. And I don't believe that my government actors should pick and choose when to do that, especially when the statute mandates them to make arrests. Like, for example, in violation of protection order cases. If you recall, this woman was on a diversion for a protection order violation given to her by Drew Buffington after he misfiled the case as a non-domestic violence case. The sheriff's office was well aware of these. In fact, throughout the entire summer, we tried numerous times to get assistance. The wife and her daughter and a lot of people associated with her that are friends with her would harass my client and his daughter. They would follow them into the gas station. They would say things openly about them in the community. They would lie about them and me by extension, but I don't care. But they were really just, I mean, anybody who had eyes knew what was going on. And I would imagine some of you watching this know exactly who I'm talking about and what the situation was because you all sat there and watched it happen. Now, I wasn't asking any of you to intervene. Law enforcement's supposed to intervene, but that didn't happen either. And that's why I tried to reach out to the district attorney's office. I had sat down with Christian Hatfield in September of 2023. In fact, we were at the Colorado Office of Victims Advocates conference together. And that was the first time that Christian Hatfield, who'd been in office since May, learned that we had a domestic violence agency called Renew, because I arranged for a meeting between Renew and Christian Hatfield because he didn't care about domestic violence victims and he didn't even know that we had a group in town. Now, Hatfield told me at that breakfast, which other women were in attendance at, that he knew there was problems with Dolores County Sheriff's Office, and if I ever had an issue with them, his door was open. And that was a complete lie. Because as soon as I started trying to get a hold of Christian Hatfield and the DA's office about this, they started harassing me and being disrespectful to me, just like the sheriff's office was doing. I tried to do an attempt to notify the district attorney of what Don Wilson and his deputies were doing, and to try and ask that this woman be stopped. She was on a diversion. The DA's office knew that. They gave it to her. And I was reporting violations of a protection order, which again, if you recall from my first episode, under 18-6-803.5, if law enforcement or the district attorney have probable cause a protection order violation has been committed, they're mandatorily required to arrest. I know my client provided at least 14 instances, and I provided a number of them to the DA. I'm not entirely certain how many. But I was directed years ago to not be allowed to contact the DA. I had to send everything through their investigator, Steve Bronk. Unlike every other attorney in town, I know why. It's because they didn't want to hear me asking them to hold law enforcement officials accountable because they're all friends with each other. They all made sure each other got elected. So years ago, I was directed to start emailing Steve Bronk, the investigator, and so I did that here as well. I provided him 3 signed affidavits from my client, his daughter, and the bank teller. I realized these people are trying to advocate for themselves. They're doing everything they possibly can. Now it's up to me to try and escalate it because law enforcement clearly isn't doing their job. And under the law enforcement hierarchy of Colorado, I'm required to notify the district attorney if the sheriff's not doing his job. Now, to be clear, the sheriff doesn't, or the DA doesn't have authority over the sheriff. The sheriff is an elected position, but he does have authority to report things for an investigation. And under our Colorado Peace Officer Safety Training Standards, when there's a request to have an investigator or an officer investigated, the only people who can report it to post for investigation at the current time are the sheriff himself or the DA. So if the only 2 individuals who can blow the whistle on this are the one involved in it and the one trying to cover it up, innocent people like my client and his daughter and his friend are going to get railroaded. Steve Bronk, when I emailed him, I told him, hey, they're not documenting calls. I've dealt with this before. Please look at these statements. And I feel like this email that I received from Steve Bronk is pretty noteworthy because this is not a county that I would want to live in. He says, I would say they're going to continue doing things in the way they are doing things. In no way, shape, or form would an agency I worked for have ever allowed us to not complete a report on a legislatively mandated arrest complaint. However, I work for much larger agencies with media oversight, citizen oversight, and more importantly, insurance company oversight. We followed the rules and laws or attempted to follow them because we would get punched in the neck from one direction or another if we didn't. Our administration and supervision were on top of us in such matters. Smaller communities and their law enforcement seem to come to an unofficial understanding that embeds itself subconsciously over years, decades, and generations. Outsiders do not understand it, and I'm not sure even insiders consciously realize it exists. That's just my analysis as an outsider trying to figure out what I've seen since I've gotten here. I do not think Don Wilson or the DCSO are corrupt in any classical sense. I think most of them are locally raised and they do a difficult job in a difficult location. I do think their methods open them to criticism from the outside from time to time. From what I interpret from that statement is Steve Bronk is telling me citizens of Dolores County can't rely on due process and equal protection because Don Wilson has allegedly come to an understanding with you that he can do whatever he wants. And I'm curious, do any of you recall entering into such an agreement? Because I sure as hell don't. Hoping that maybe one more thing that she did would incite the sheriff's office to do their job or maybe get the district attorney to realize I was being serious. And now I kind of think that they knew the whole time. It was just a collusive effort to shut me up and to prevent my clients from getting help. I don't, November 4th of 2023, there was a football game in Dolores County. And I believe it was a Saturday day game. My client was there, and lo and behold, after all of the things that had happened, after all the other events that they had showed up to the football games, in fact, one where they mentioned that even though they knew she had a 100-yard distance provision keeping her away, they couldn't figure out how to measure 100 yards at a football field. So November 4th, the football game happens. The ex-wife showed up with one of her friends. They were very, very close in proximity to my client's truck. My client was worried they were damaging his truck. He tried to say something to Braden Banks, and Braden Banks said to him, you know, I'm never going to arrest her, right? So my client left the game. He chose to leave. And he went over to Bangor Sports Bar. And lo and behold, there came his ex-wife and her friend and Braden Banks, who parked his cruiser across the street facing the bar. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but we believe that Braden Banks was texting the wife, and we believe that they were trying to get my client in trouble for drinking and driving. They were going to try to get him so that we would lay off of her. And even though she wasn't allowed to be within 100 yards of him, she was in that bar the entire afternoon. Braden Banks was watching it happen from across the street. And other people were like, why is she here? What's going on? She made comments about his genitalia in front of people. She said openly loud things to him and got within about 5 feet of him. At this point in time, we knew we had her. We had probable cause because Bangor Sports Bar has surveillance. So my client was pretty upset. And on Monday, November 6th, he decided to go back to Bangor Sports Bar and get that surveillance because he's tired of being harassed. And he's tired of being targeted by the Dolores County Sheriff's Office, and he felt nervous because he thinks that they were trying to set him up. I believe that that's true. The Dolores County Sheriff's Office followed him and a number of my other clients numerous occasions in a very menacing way, letting them know if you don't turn your blinker on, we're going to make sure you're in trouble. In their way. Those are my words, not theirs. Anyways, so the my client contacted the sheriff, and the sheriff said, we're not going to do anything about it. We told them there was surveillance footage. I have those emails. And so I said, fine, forget this. We'll just file civil contempt. Your protection order was issued through your divorce case. We'll take it back to Judge William first. So I contacted Don Wilson after my client made the phone call. My client made the phone call on Monday. In fact, I told him, hey, make sure you have some way to document you place this call because Don Wilson doesn't keep logs of your calls. So my client called from his work phone from a landline, and he was able to take a picture of the outgoing call with the date and time. I contacted Don Wilson and I said, hey, I need a record of this call because I know it made it to you. I have the information. I know this is what you spoke about. I know you told him you're not going to do anything. And I need to file this civil contempt. We'll have Judge First deal with it since you guys are not protecting him. And suddenly the sheriff said, sorry, we're doing an investigation. You can't get any reports. Now, I can tell you that my client did go pick up the surveillance footage. And he also knew that Don Wilson had left a flash drive there for the surveillance footage, but he never went and picked it up. Now, if you recall from the first episode, the wife had been put on a diversion. And she had a 6-month diversion, which is virtually unheard of. Those of you that have had criminal charges in the 22nd Judicial District should know that that's nonsense. That being said, we knew that her diversion was going to expire, and that essentially the protection order violation that she had been convicted of, not including the one that they dismissed improperly, was going to basically be wiped away because she hadn't allegedly committed any violations of the law because the Dolores County Sheriff's Office refused to respond to over 14 complaints, making sure that she would not be convicted of anything. So now we have a record and now we have the evidence. I have the flash drive in my possession, and we knew that the deadline for this diversion to expire was November 15th of 2023. And I said, I'll be damned if I'm going to let this happen to you again. And I continued to contact the sheriff. He would not respond to me, but he would respond to my client in emails. So I said to my client, fine, you email him and then forward it to me and we'll deal with it that way. And the sheriff's office kept just sort of dinking around. So, it's pretty easy. You go and you pick up the flash drive. The bar had put the surveillance footage on the flash drive. All he had to do was retrieve it and watch it. However, that didn't happen. So, because of the fact that her diversion was going to expire on November 15th, we were trying very diligently to make sure the sheriff followed through on charging like he told my client he was going to. He told my client he was going to investigate and he was going to charge her. And so we're getting close to that deadline. My client emailed him a number of times throughout the week after November 6th and kind of got the runaround. And we're getting pretty urgent because I'm like, I know what they're going to do. They're doing this on purpose so that she'll get out of her first one. And then they're going to mess up the second one because, that's just what they're doing. So on the morning of November 14th, my client received an email from Don Wilson, and Phyllis was attached to it, with a warrant for his ex-wife attached to it. Now, my client has been involved in enough legal matters at this point in time because of everything that went on to recognize that there was something very wrong with this document. First of all, there was no court case on it, and in order for a warrant to be served or issued, it has to go through a court case. It has to go through a judge. But bizarrely, this warrant had Matt Murchison's signature on it already. And we believe that the sheriff of Dolores County, Leslie Don Wilson, forged Matt Murchison's signature. We believe it was a piece of clip art that he used, and we're concerned that he's done it in other cases. And so my client immediately sent it to me and was like, what the heck is this? On top of that, the sheriff had set bond for the ex-wife, which I don't know if you know this, but the sheriff's not allowed to set bond. That's not within his authority. Secondarily, he set a $500 PR bond for her, and you're not allowed to have PR bonds in domestic violence cases. You have to be seen by a judge. So Sheriff Wilson took care of that by filing it again as a non-domestic violence case. I started emailing Steve Bronk right away, following the protocol, letting him know, hey, I'm pretty sure the Sheriff Don Wilson forged a warrant and we need to take care of this. I wasn't asking them to go after Don. In fact, what I said was, hey, my client's had enough of this. He wasn't even interviewed by Don. Don lied in his affidavit for the warrant. He put incorrect information in there. He never went and picked up the evidence. So there's a chain of custody issue. And I'm asking you guys to do the right thing. Dismiss this bullshit case. Excuse my language. I'm mad. Dismiss this bogus case and refile it, interview my client, give him the courtesy of speaking to him and hearing his side of the story, and get the evidence that Don Wilson claims he has that's sitting at Bangor Sports Bar. Seems like a logical solution. I even told them I'd let it go. I wouldn't say another word about it. Instead, they got together and came up with a lie to tell me. Now, I don't know why these guys think that they can do this to me all the time. We all took the same test. I took the exact same bar exam as them. To be honest, I think I'm smarter than most of them because I would know that anybody with half a brain cell investigating this is going to see right through what they did because we have digital court timestamps. The story they gave me was that the judge really did sign it and it really did happen at 10:51. But there wasn't a court clerk to enter it, and so that's why it was not in the system. Now I know that's also nonsense because even if in fact now I'm in Cortez, I get these emails from my client, and I'm like, something's up here. This doesn't make any sense. I was looking in the court record because I know when a case is open, there's a digital court case number, digital court file, and a case number that's assigned to it. So I go to look in the records and I can't find anything for this person. In fact, I even called over to Montezuma County and spoke to one of the clerks there and asked them to confirm whether or not there was a case or a warrant filed in this. And I have a recording of that I will demonstrate to law enforcement. I'll provide it if I need to, proving there was not a case filed at the time she had been taken into custody and was being transported to the Montezuma County Jail by Braden Banks, her friend. We do have the dash cam of that, which was funny. Seemed like it was real performative because I had been up their butts about not using their lapel cameras correctly. In this case and other cases, because of the new Senate Bill 217, they were not following the rules with that. So they made a big production of documenting her arrest on camera and, her dash cam in her transport to and from the jail. Where she continues to make threats against my client and also alleges that she was told by Don Wilson and Coach Kelshaw she can do whatever she wants to my. I also tried to email Drew Buffington, who was, again, the attorney on that case. And now I don't know exactly what Matt Margison knew, and I don't know if he even knew about it, but what I do know was Matt Margison wasn't in Dolores County at the time of the warrant signing because he was at a lunch meeting in Montezuma County with a colleague of mine. And I don't know about you all, but I think that's pretty egregious. I think that's something that should have been investigated. They completely ignored me. And when I tried to talk to Drew on, so I realized I wasn't going to get any help. I realized this woman had been illegally arrested, and I don't care for the woman at all, but her rights were violated too. Now, whether or not she was part of that whole scam, I don't know. But what I believe the scam was is they were going to deliberately mess it up so that the case would get dismissed. Just like they had not turned in the evidence on her daughter's charge a couple weeks earlier. Just like how they had dismissed cases and told us they weren't going to file things when they did. Now, I don't know about you all, but I think that seems pretty criminal. And I would not want an elected official doing any of those things. I don't care who they are. This is not a partisan matter. This is a constitutional and state law matter. And when the top dog in your county is committing the most egregious crimes, and the person who's supposed to keep him in line is helping him, boy, oh boy, do we have a really big problem. They never dismissed the case. They never told anybody they forged the warrant. And at this point in time, I know that this thing happened. I knew that somebody else had witnessed this happen. I know the court record didn't reflect things correctly. And I was really concerned about Matthew Margison because he had recently been put on the bench. And I thought to myself, man, if I was a new judge and I found out the sheriff was forging my signature, I'd really be concerned. But you know what happened? Later that day, there was a warrant that was issued by Judge Margison with a different signature on it. And I don't know. Well, why don't you just look at them side by side? You decide. Andrew Buffington, all of these things. I also asked them why wasn't my client given the benefit of the Victims' Rights Act? It was at that point in time Drew Buffington got creative in the court file and started changing the designation of charges in the cases they had already closed. He modified all of them to make them domestic violence cases after we caught him. And suddenly my client had a victim's advocate, Rebecca Garner. They didn't really help him and they didn't really answer his questions, but at least they made it look like they were doing the right thing. In the meantime, I'm still trying to make this right. I'm still insisting to Drew Buffington, hey, you just make it right, dude. Just make it right. That's all I'm asking you to do. Make it right. This man's been through enough. I'll let it go. I won't say anything. I'll keep my mouth shut. Instead, Drew Buffington yelled at me on the phone about another case in Dolores County that he's not involved in or a party to. And I told him, don't you ever talk to me about that case again. And I hung up the phone on him. So in the now, Christian Hatfield suddenly was interested in talking to me about 2 weeks after the fact. In fact, bizarrely, he was burning the midnight oil on Thanksgiving and wrote me a letter. Wonder what he was doing at that time of night. Anyways, in this email, where he tagged a number of government officials trying to intimidate me and threaten me, he demanded that I meet him in his office. I told him I would not do that because I did not feel safe. I didn't trust them, but I'd be willing to do a Zoom meeting. He would not commit to that. He continued to be more and more hostile to me in the email thread. And eventually, he accused me of accusing his office of being involved in a larger conspiracy, which they were, and also threatened me about my mental health. To which I responded, I don't know what I'm accused of doing. I've asked you 3 times in this email thread alone what I've alleged to have done. You won't tell me. So unless you can give me words, a date and a time of something I allegedly did or said against your office, stop saying it because it's not true and you're bullying me. Secondly, if you want to turn me into the state bar in retaliation for asking for assistance in protecting domestic violence victims from your officers, go ahead. I'll give them all of these emails. And that was the last time I ever spoke to Christian Hatfield. I have that email. It was discriminatory towards me. And I can tell you, after that happened, things started to get worse. Upon that, I did have a woman who was well known, who was a community person, who had some ties, try to help me when I showed her, hey, they won't even listen to me. They're calling me names. They're threatening me. They're alleging that I'm committing crimes. What do I do? She tried to help me. And she wrote a letter to the Colorado District Attorney's Council, Victims Witness Unit, letting them know what was going on and even clarifying, like, hey, we just want help. We don't know what to do. And as a result, we believe, of her sending that letter, she was later framed for crimes by the DA, charged, lost her position, and was told that she was terminated because of a bad rapport with the DA's office when the DA's office doesn't work with her former employer. So in the meantime, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly am I going to do here. I don't know exactly what to do. This is crazy. And I'm continuing to email them saying, hey, I know this isn't right. I can see the digital court record. I can see the document Don Wilson sent to me. They're not the same. I know Matt wasn't in the courthouse because a friend of mine was having lunch with Matt. I know he was in Montezuma County. He wasn't in Dolores County at the time that document was signed. I know that to be true. So I don't know how Matt's signature got on it later that afternoon, but what I do know is the digital court stamp says that warrant was signed at 1:40 p.m. Filed, I believe, 1:49 p.m. It was actually filed by Don Wilson at 1:49 p.m. and signed by Matt at 1:50 p.m. when Matt wasn't in the courthouse. What they didn't know was later that afternoon, after they thought they got away with it, Drew Buffington and Cheyenne Martin were sitting in the Dolores County courthouse, and another person, an individual whose name I will not give, was in the courtroom waiting for a family member of hers to have a court hearing. And she saw Don Wilson scurry into the courtroom and whisper loudly into Drew Buffington's ear that there had been an issue with the warrant and that Carlson had caught on and he needed help to fix it. And from what I know, it sounds like the 3 of them laughed and talked about pulling one over on Carlson. That's what's going on in Montezuma County. That's what's been happening there in Montezuma and Dolores counties. And that person's afraid to talk to. Otherwise, I would reveal that person's information as well, because I believe that person deserves justice and I believe that person deserves to be made whole. I believe my client deserves to be made whole. I believe I deserve to be made whole. Because while all of this was going on, I couldn't take cases. I was completely enraptured in these cases. These guys kept me tied up. This was just one of 4 cases going on that was like this. Like I said, this was the minor one. And that's where we're going to stop today, because we got one more section of this one. And I want you to know, I didn't want to have to do this. I don't like doing it this way. My clients wanted privacy. My clients didn't want to have to sign waivers and have me tell their stories. My clients aren't on these recordings for a reason because they're scared. They don't feel safe in their communities. And I don't care what political party you belong to. I know there's a lot of people who call me liberal. I've been registered independent since I could vote. I ran the mock campaign for Ross Perot in my sixth grade mock election. Okay. I don't believe in partisan politics. I do believe in my Constitution and I do believe in my law. And regardless of which way you sway politically, if you think any of this is okay, then I don't know what to tell you. But I'm going to guess that the majority of you don't. And I'm going to guess the majority of you are just as outraged as me. And so I'm going to ask you, based on what I just relayed, are these just the ramblings of a crazy woman? Or is there maybe a need for investigation? That's been this all stops when we start talking about it. We'll see you next Wednesday for part 3.